Hello everybody, Mobius1 here, bringing you my first ever Star Wars Unlimited Shadows of the Galaxy card preview video. With Star Wars Unlimited's first expansion, Shadows of the Galaxy, being just over a month away, I thought it'd be a good time to take a look at some of the cards that are going to be releasing in that set and sharing my thoughts on them with you. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the first 10 cards that were shown to the public back at the beginning of April. So yeah, full disclosure, these cards have been known to us for a little over 2 months now, and I may have some experience playing with some of these cards in Force Table, since as the cards have been spoiled, they've been added to the website. That being said, I've never actually played with any of these cards against other actual players, so my experience with them is more or less, take it for what it is. Let's start off by taking a look at one of the two leader cards that are going to be included in the Shadows of the Galaxy starter set, Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon is a green-black leader with the action that lets you exhaust him and attack with a unit that costs 3 or less. If it's attacking a unit, it gets +1/+0 for this attack. Then, when you control only 5 resources, which is pretty early in the game, you can deploy him. And once deployed, he becomes a 3/6 unit with Overwhelm. And each friendly unit that costs 3 or less gets +1/+0 and gains Overwhelm while attacking an enemy unit. So the immediate comparison is Leia Organa, who is a green-white leader, also deploys on 5 resources, is also a 3/6 stat line. However, Leia has Raid 1 as a keyword as opposed to Overwhelm, and also allows you to attack with a second unit, so long as that unit is a rebel, whenever she attacks. I think that makes Leia a little bit more flexible than Gideon. Now, Moff Gideon is clearly trying to push some sort of green-black aggressive deck, being built around including lots of 1, 2, or 3 cost units in the deck to swarm your opponent. What's interesting, though, is that he gives units Overwhelm when attacking enemy units, and attacking enemy units is not typically something that you want to be doing when playing an aggro deck. However, the fact that you're giving them Overwhelm means if you're making smart trades, you'll be clearing the opponent's board as well as doing some excess, whatever excess damage you're doing on your attacks will still be damaging the opponent's base. So it's a really interesting kind of control aggro combo that until we really see what other cheap costed units, like 3 or less cost units are going to be coming out in this set, it's going to be interesting to see what or how powerful that actually ends up being. I am excited to actually see a dark side leader pushing an aggro deck, because currently there haven't been many very popular aggro decks. A lot of the villainy dark side decks so far have been more on the control side. But yeah, overall, I think Moff Gideon's going to be pretty strong. He'll definitely be played and experimented with just simply for that reason, that we haven't had a very powerful dark side aggro leader yet, and I think that alone will put him somewhere in the meta, but where is yet to be determined. The other leader that's going to be coming in the Shadows of the Galaxy starter set is the Mandalorian, a yellow-white leader that when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust this leader, and if you do, exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP. Now, upgrades are kind of a big deal in Shadows of the Galaxy. There's going to be a huge upgrade, synergy, identity push coming out in this set, as well as Mandalorians, which you can see the Mandalorian appropriately has the Mandalorian trait underneath the artwork there. So Mandalorians upgrades going to kind of go hand in hand in this set. You'll see a little bit more of that here in a bit. The Mandalorian deploys on 6 resources, and when he deploys, he becomes a 4/7 with, when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust an enemy unit with 6 or less remaining HP. Already, I think this leader fits right at home in the orange or cunning category, where we already have cards that like to exhaust enemy units, such as Asteroid Sanctuary or No Good to Me Dead. And just going back to the leader side of the card, the fact that the ability triggers when you play an upgrade and does not require you to spend an action, I think that alone makes this a very powerful effect. We know how important the action economy of Star Wars Unlimited is, where since players can only take 1 action at a time and your opponent has the opportunity to respond, and claiming the initiative can sometimes be so important to closing out a game. playing a card and getting just a bonus effect off of the action of playing that card makes this incredibly powerful. And same thing, once it deploys as a leader unit, the HP threshold goes up to 6, which encompasses quite a large number of actual leader units. I mean, sure, it's not going to hit your Luke Skywalkers, your Darth Vaders, but even if you manage to do like 1 damage to Boba Fett, who has 7 HP when he deploys, that would allow you to play an upgrade and just immediately exhaust their leader unit for the turn. Also note that while the leader is deployed, this can trigger multiple times per phase. So while the leader side of the card requires it to exhaust, resulting in you only being able to benefit from it once per phase, if the Mandalorian is in the field, deployed, and you play multiple upgrades, you can be exhausting multiple targets in the same phase, which is, again, pretty strong. All that being said, it's really going to boil down to how good are upgrades. How powerful is it to be running upgrades in your deck? Because if we take a look at Spark of Rebellion, the current meta, yes, there are a couple of upgrades that are run, but really, there's so much removal in the current meta that playing an upgrade on a unit usually just results in that unit being a juicier target for your opponent's Vanquish or your opponent's takedown, or if it's the only unit you have, it makes it a really powerful Power of the Dark Side, or even bouncing effects like Waylay to send that unit back to your hand, and the upgrade is just simply lost, sent to the discard pile. So it's really going to come down to are there any really powerful upgrades that we absolutely want to run, and what is the proper number of upgrades to be running in your deck? Because obviously you don't want to fill your deck with upgrades and not put any units in it, because you can't play upgrades without having a unit to attach them to. Seems obvious, right? But yeah, it's something that you need to consider. So next, let's take a look at Wanted. Since we've been talking about upgrades, here's one of the first upgrades they revealed for Shadows of the Galaxy, which also includes one of the expansion's new keywords, Bounty. Wanted is a zero-cost upgrade that says the attached unit gains Bounty, ready to friendly resources. So then in parentheses there, it goes on to explain roughly what Bounty is. When this unit is defeated or captured, which is another mechanic we'll get to in a little bit, its opponent collects its bounty. So the idea is you play bounty upgrades onto your opponent's units, and then when those units are either defeated or captured, you, since you are the unit's opponent, collect the bounty, which in this case you get to ready 2 friendly resources. So immediately you can start seeing some of the synergies. If you are playing a deck with the Mandalorian as a leader, you play this zero-cost upgrade onto an enemy unit, and you immediately get to exhaust the Mandalorian to exhaust a unit that has 4 or less remaining HP, which could be the unit you attached Wanted onto. Then, when you defeat that unit, you get to collect the bounty by readying up 2 resources. Bounties are very interesting, however, they do obviously take an action to play. So, my first, real instinct on bounty cards are, I love the mechanic, it's super flavorful. You're putting a bounty on a target, and then if that target gets defeated, you're getting some sort of bonus. I think that's super flavorful, and I love it. However, it does hurt the action economy. So until we see a card that says something along the lines of when played or on attack, play a bounty card from your hand or something like that, I'm not really sold on how good or how strong bounties are going to be. One way to look at Wanted is you're sacrificing an action and a card to potentially get 2 extra resources. I was going to say on a later turn, but I guess technically it could be on the same turn depending on if you played a card already or not. But yeah, I don't know if giving up both a card from your hands and a whole action to do basically nothing is worth getting 2 extra resources. It might be. In the right deck, it might be. But we're going to have to wait and see. And continuing with the Mandalorian upgrade synergy package, we have the Razor Crest, which is a 4-cost 3/4 space unit with Restore 2, and when played, you may return an upgrade from your discard pile to your hand. Now, I think that's a super powerful effect because that means you can play fewer upgrades in your deck and still get more out of them by pulling them back into your hand from your discard pile after they've been sent there. You know, if we just use Wanted, for example, you attach Wanted to an enemy unit, you defeat that unit, the Wanted will go into your discard pile, and then you can play Razor Crest to get that Wanted back and play it for free on another unit, just cycling that one upgrade over and over again, depending on how many, Razor Crests you play. It's not an on-attack effect, so you won't be getting them back over and over again, but Razor Crest being a 3/4 for 4 with Restore 2 is on its own pretty powerful. The closest thing we have to compare this to currently is System Patrolcraft, which is also a 3/4 for 4. However, instead of Restore 2, it has Sentinel. In a way, that can be interpreted as a one-time Restore 4, maybe? If it's soaking 4 HP that would otherwise have been dealt to your base, it's almost like you're healing your base for 4. So if you can swing twice with Razor Crest and get, a total of 4 HP healed to your base, you're already beating System Patrolcraft without even considering the second effect of Razor Crest. I would even go so far as to say that Razor Crest has what you would call pseudo Sentinel, meaning that while it doesn't actually have Sentinel, it more or less does, because if your opponent doesn't defeat it, then you're just going to continue to Restore 2 phase after phase or round after round. And because of that makes it a juicy target for your opponent to deal with, thus treating it like it has Sentinel. I think if you're going to be running an upgrade deck, especially one with Mandalorian synergies in it, I think Razor Crest is going to be an auto-include so long as it meets your aspect requirements. Rounding out the upgrades that we're going to be talking about in this video, we have the Mandalorian's Rifle, which is a 3-cost upgrade. It gives the attached unit +3 attack. And when played, if attached unit is the Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit. So capturing is, again, another new mechanic that's going to be introduced in Shadows of the Galaxy. And as you can see in parentheses on the card, it says, put the capture card face down under him until he leaves play. So the way this works is if you have the Mandalorian deployed in the ground arena and you attach the Mandalorian's Rifle to him, first, you'll get to trigger his effect, which is when you play an upgrade, exhaust a unit with 6 or less remaining HP. And then you can trigger the Mandalorian Rifle's effect, which, since you're attaching it to the Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit, which can be the person that you just exhausted. You will take that exhausted unit, turn it face down, and put it under the Mandalorian. And then if the Mandalorian is ever defeated, the captured unit will return to play under your opponent's control exhausted. It's worth noting that when we looked at Wanted, the bounty card earlier, bounties are collected when the attached unit is either defeated or captured. So this is a way to quickly cash in on bounties. It's also another great way to remove upgrades from enemy units, because if the unit you capture has upgrades on it, those upgrades just go to the discard pile. We'll see some more cards in the future with this capture effect on them, and I think it's pretty cool. I don't know how much of it we're going to see in the meta, because it is a form of temporary removal, but I can definitely see it becoming a pretty effective method of closing out games, especially against Sentinel units. So I think capture as a mechanic is going to be pretty strong. This card in particular, I'm not too sure about, because you only get the capture effect if you're attaching it to the Mandalorian. So if we're going to see this, it's probably only going to be run in a Mandalorian deck. Even though we are going to see one more Mandalorian card in this video, you know what? Let's just talk about that right now. So here we have it. The Mandalorian, not the leader, just the unit, is a 6-cost 5/6 Sentinel. When played, you may heal all damage from a unit that costs 2 or less and give 2 shield tokens to it. So I was actually planning on talking about this card a little bit later in the video, but since we're talking about the Mandalorian's Rifle, I will just point out that you don't really need to be playing the Mandalorian as your leader in order to run that card. You could simply be playing this unit, who's also the Mandalorian, but I don't know that you would want to, because 6 HP on a Sentinel unit means that that captured unit is probably still going to, it's probably going to get returned to your opponent at some point. Since the Mandalorian's rifle only adds 3 HP, 3 power and no HP, it wouldn't be that difficult for your opponent to defeat this unit and get their captured unit back. But let's just, ignoring the Mandalorian's rifle for now, let's just talk about this unit. I love this unit. A 5/6 for 6 with Sentinel that heals and puts 2 shield tokens on a unit that costs 2 or less. I think that's really strong. You can compare that to Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's also a 6 cost 4/6 with Sentinel, and when defeated, gives 2 experience tokens to another friendly unit. If it's a Force unit, you can draw a card. Obi-Wan is currently run in blue-white control decks. His effect does stack really well, or does synergize really well with Luke Skywalker, who the leader unit Luke will deploy on 6, and the Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight unit can be played on 7. So the Obi-Wan effect being a when defeated versus the Mandalorian's when played, they're both good effects. I think Obi-Wan's effect might be a little bit better, but you are also getting 1 extra attack out of the Mandalorian. I think they're both good cards. They could both potentially be run in the same deck if it's going to be heavy enough of a deck. One thing the Mandalorian card is certainly was done on purpose, undoubtedly, is its synergies with the following card, Grogu. Irresistible. A 2-cost 0/5 with action to exhaust him and exhaust an enemy unit. First of all, a 0/5 for 2, that is a thick booty on baby Grogu here. 5 HP for a 2-cost unit is pretty insane. In Spark of Rebellion, we have a couple of 4 HP 2-cost units, like Scout Bike Pursuer and C-3PO. I think also maybe Admiral Piet. And R2-D2 is a 1/4 for 1. But I'm pretty sure that Grogu was the first 5 HP 2-cost in Star Wars Unlimited. And while he has no attack power, just his action ability is quite powerful. He can exhaust an enemy unit, no restrictions. And say you've got a Grogu in play, your opponent attacks into him but can't kill him because he's got 5 HP, and then on your next turn you play the Mandalorian for 6, heal Grogu back to full and put 2 shield tokens on him. That's quite strong. Even without the Mandalorian synergy, I think Grogu on his own is still a pretty powerful 2-drop, especially in a cunning deck that early in the game is probably just looking to delay your opponent and disrupt their plans. Obviously, exhausting units is not as powerful as removing them, but I think the just being able to delay them while you continue to develop your own plan is probably worth running him. And let's not forget one crucial detail about Grogu, the Force trait. Simply having a unit in play with the Force trait makes other cards much more powerful in Star Wars Unlimited, such as Force Throw, which allows you to deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the cost of the card that's discarded. But even more powerful than this, considering you're probably running Grogu in a deck with the Mandalorian, and the Mandalorian leader synergizes off of playing upgrades, consider playing Grogu on turn 1, followed by Jedi Lightsaber on turn 2. You now get to exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP, and your Grogu is now a 3/8 that gives the defender -2/2 on attack, followed up on turn 3 with The Force is With Me, which makes your Grogu a 5/10 with a shield token. A 5/10 shielded on turn 3. That is quite insane. Of course, it's defeated instantly by power of the dark side, and if Grogu is ever somehow captured by your opponent, all of those upgrades get destroyed. So, is this the dream? Probably. Am I going to do it? Absolutely. Am I going to cry when my opponent defeats it with 1 card? Yeah. But it's still really cool. Alright, enough talking about the good guys. Let's pivot back to the Moff Gideon deck and talk about some of the other villainy cards that were revealed to us. We have Calculated Lethality. This is a 4-cost event that says defeat a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less. For each upgrade that was on that unit, give an experience token to a friendly unit. So, we play our turn 1 Grogu, turn 2 Jedi Lightsaber, turn 3 the Force is with me. We have a 5/10 Grogu that swings for, -2/-2 on the defender and has a shield token. And then our opponent plays Calculated Lethality. Defeats our Grogu because he only costs 2 despite all of his upgrades, and for each upgrade that was on that unit gives an experience token to a friendly unit, and that's Jedi Lightsaber plus the shield token, so they not only defeat our Grogu and totally destroy our board because that's all that we've played all game, but they also get to give 2 experience tokens to friendly units. I'm going to be honest, the strength of this card, this card does not impress me really all that much at first glance, because if we compare it to some of the other removal that we already have in the game, such as Takedown. Takedown is also a 4-cost removal card to defeat an enemy unit or defeat a unit with 5 or less remaining HP. Yes, obviously this would not work in our specific example of the 10 HP Grogu, but it is a little bit more flexible in terms of the cost of the unit. If you're playing something that costs more than 3, Calculated Lethality is immediately not effective anymore, whereas Takedown can be effective. Takedown also looks at how much remaining HP the target has and not how much total HP or maximum HP they could have. So Takedown can even be used against leaders if you chip away their health a little bit. And Blue-Black also has Power of the Dark Side, which, yes, you don't get to choose the target, your opponent does. But again, if you're looking at our very specific example of Jedi Master Grogu, Power of the Dark Side would also get rid of the 5/10 shielded Grogu for 1 less resource. You wouldn't get the 2 experience tokens out of it, but if you don't have a board because you're playing a hard control deck, which if you're playing Blue-Black, you might be, those experience tokens might not mean anything anyway. So, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I'm going to just go out and say that Calculated Lethality, again, is really ultimately going to depend on how good the upgrade meta is. If upgrades are being run a lot, then Calculated Lethality is going to be a good tech counter card to that. But if upgrades aren't being run, I think Blue-Black has much better options as far as removal goes. Moving on to a unit, we have the Phase 3 Dark Trooper, which is a 3-cost 3/3 Sentinel. When combat damage is dealt to this unit, give an experience token to this unit if it survives the damage. I think this is pretty cool. 3/3 Sentinel, we actually already have. Cell Block Guard from Spark of Rebellion is already a 3-cost 3/3 Sentinel. Without the green requirement, it's not a command card, it's simply villainy, but it doesn't have the second effect. Now, how powerful the second effect is questionable, because in order to fully understand the card, Phase 3 Dark Trooper, you have to understand what is considered combat damage. And combat damage is damage that is done when 2 units fight. In other words, if you're playing a Phase 3 Dark Trooper against, like, Darth Vader, and Darth Vader uses their leader ability to deal 1 damage to a unit and 1 damage to a base, the 1 damage dealt to Phase 3 Dark Trooper would not give him an experience token, because that 1 damage ping is not considered combat damage. That means unless you're attacking into 1 attack units with Phase 3 Dark Trooper, that second effect is probably not going to trigger more than once. The only way you're going to get that to trigger is if you are attacked or attack into a 1 or 2 attack unit. So because of this, I don't think Phase 3 Dark Trooper is a strictly better Cell Block Guard. I think if you're running a green-black deck and you're looking for a cheap Sentinel unit, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to take Phase 3 Dark Trooper over Cell Block Guard. They even share the same traits. They're both Imperial and Trooper. The Phase 3 Dark Trooper has the additional droid trait, which at this point is kind of meaningless, but maybe in the future that'll be important. But any sort of buffs, like General Veers, that buffs Imperial units, that would buff both the Cell Block Guard and the Phase 3 Dark Trooper. All of that being said, I still don't think Phase 3 Dark Trooper is strictly better because of the green aspect requirement. So if you're playing green villainy, then yes, I would run Phase 3 Dark Trooper over Cell Block Guard. But Cell Block art is probably still going to see a little bit of play in villainy decks of other aspect colors, like a maybe like a double blue Iden deck or something. I don't know, but I'm sure we haven't seen the end of Cell Block Guard simply because Phase 3 Dark Trooper is out. And last but certainly not least for this video, we've got Gideon's Light Cruiser, which is an 8-cost 7/8 space unit with Overwhelm. And when played, if you control Moff Gideon as a leader or unit, you can play a black or villainy unit that costs 3 or less from your hand or discard pile for free. This card's quite interesting because the closest card we have to compare it to is Home 1, which is a heroism card, not a villainy card. It is also an 8-cost. It's a 7/7. It has Restore 2 instead of Overwhelm, but it has a very similar when played effect, which lets you play a heroism unit from your discard pile. It costs 3 less. Now, that's not exactly the same, because if you have, say, 10 resources and you play Home 1, the 3-cost discount would let you still use your 2 remaining resources to play a 5-cost unit from your discard pile, whereas Gideon's Cruiser just lets you straight up play a 3-cost unit for free, 3 or less for free. There's no discount. There's no way you can ever play a 4 or higher cost unit, even if you have spare resources left over. Now, Gideon's Light Cruiser also lets you play it from your hand if you're holding on to it, which does give you a little bit more flexibility than Home 1, and it has Overwhelm and 1 extra HP. With the very big stipulation that you only get the when played effect if Moff Gideon is your leader. And I think that's going to hinder how much we see Gideon's Light Cruiser, unless it's like the absolute top end of the deck, because Gideon, again, like we spoke about early in this episode, is kind of pushing a aggressive green-black deck type. So would you really want to run an 8-cost ship in an aggro deck? You might. Typically you don't. Typically you want to stop resourcing in an aggro deck around 6 resources and then just continue drawing 2 cards and playing 2 cheap cards each turn and kind of overwhelm your opponent. A different kind of overwhelm than Gideon's Light Cruiser. But, because you can get that 3-cost unit for free, I can't rule it out as an option. It might very well be a high end. But the other thing to consider is what other high ends are you going to be running in a green-black deck? You could be running Devastator, which also has Overwhelm. It has Sentinel, which means if your opponent is threatening to overwhelm or overload your space arena while you're playing all of your ground units, the Devastator can absolutely shut that down. And when played, you can deal damage to a unit equal to the number of resources you control, which is going to be 10, which means you pretty much get to destroy 1 of anything as soon as you play it. So yes, it costs 2 more resources than Gideon's Light Cruiser, so it's going to require you to invest even more time, more cards into resourcing, which again, you probably don't want to be doing. But if you're going to be playing an 8, you might as well be playing a 10, at least in my opinion. And I think Devastator is just overall a better card. And it doesn't require your leader to be Moff Gideon. If you're playing green-black, which Gideon is green-black, I don't know. I think Gideon's Light Cruiser is slightly underwhelming, despite the fact that it has the Overwhelm keyword. But again, I can't rule it out as like an absolute top-end card in an aggressive Moff Gideon deck. We'll see. Anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. There are a lot more Star Wars Unlimited Shadows of the Galaxy cards that have already been revealed that I have to get around to reviewing. So if you thought this video was helpful, if you learned anything, if you have any questions or comments or criticisms, anything at all, please leave a comment down below. Let me know. If you have any suggestions as to any ways that I could do these videos better in the future, I'd love to hear them. Like I said, this is my first time doing anything like this. So I hope I gave you enough of my thoughts. Look forward to more of these coming out in the near future. If you want to learn more about Star Wars Unlimited, I have a Learn to Play video on my channel already, including a gameplay tutorial on the Force Table website. If you're looking for people to play with, join my Discord. Link to that's in the video description. Thank you all for watching. Mobius1 here, and I'll see you in the next one.